Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Truth Behind the Crime. I'm Rocker Mike, and the infamous Rob Rossi is to my right. How you doing, Rob?
I'm pretty good today.
Okay, great. And we have special guest Frank DeGennaro and his lovely wife, Maria. How are you two doing?
Fine, thank you.
Okay. We're going to be talking about the Wendy Savino case again. We did talk about this in the last episode. Again, Son of Sam stuff going on. We had tried to get out of this world for a little bit, but we got dragged back in because of this Wendy Savino shooting that's been attached to the timeline. Now, Frank, we're going to dive right in here. You've had a 30-year relationship with David Berkowitz. Is that correct?
Yes, he's been my friend since 1993. I've been writing to him and visiting him shortly thereafter. Yes.
Okay. How did you, in short, how'd you meet him? How'd you get connected?
He was on the Inside Edition show and with Maury Terry,
93,
and I saw it. And I was a Catholic believer in the Lord and an always believer. I'm never waned on that. And I looked at him and I said, I believe him. I believe that he is this different person. And I wrote to him and I said that to him. And I was very surprised, but he wrote back. And more than writing back, that he kept writing to me. Every time I'd write to him, he'd write back. And I was a little surprised about that.
Right.
And yeah, that's how it started.
So when you do the writing thing, how is it? It's on the internet or it's a letter? How does that work?
That was letters back then. And I would write I would tell him about my life. And, I just had a daughter, was born, and he sent her a card. I have that. It's pretty cool. And I would tell him about my life. And he was very, very interested in my life because I worked in the Bronx. And I was a teacher at the time. I became an assistant principal and a principal. And my school, the whole idea behind my schools were to get kids work. And these were special needs kids, exclusively special needs. So I would get them jobs in working in hospitals and nursing homes and even gardening. Some of the kids would, get jobs as gardeners. And, it was very successful. And I would write about that and write all the wonderful things I was doing. And he was telling me his side of everything. And, when you write in a letter or you talk to him on the phone, any way you communicate with him, they can listen or they can open up the letters. I think back then he said every letter that he sent to me was not read, but everything that came in was read.
Yeah, they always do that. They read everything because they want to make sure you're not sending any contraband or drugs. Right. So that's the only reason they do it. But once they open it, sometimes they don't read. They just open to make sure there's no drugs in there.
Well, one of the things that he said recently that's like, I'm uneducated when it comes to this, but he said that they were sending things in the papers, and the people there were
like a sheet of acid.
and they were smoking it and drinking it. And he said that as a result, like I can't send him a book just from me. It has to come from a company. I used to be able to send him all sorts of things, and I can't now.
You find all kinds of ways, right?
There's a lot of drugs in prison. There's a lot of it's of course none of us would want to be there, but it's an impossible place to be.
Now, Frank, I wanted you on the show. I've known you for a couple of years now through the community and everything. We always got along well. But you became kind of front and center a little bit with this in the Wendy Savino case, because when the police had gone up to see David in the end of May, I believe it was the 29th, right? That is the report there. And there was little blocked out lines there. That is your name redacted. So might as well forget about the redactment right there. But, they came up to kind of get a confession out of David, not knowing that David was already well aware about this case, okay? And you had informed him based on a podcast that was out there with Wendy Savino, an interview with her where she talks about what happened, Okay, so you had informed David about this podcast, right? How'd that happen?
Yes. That's all I did is that I watched this video, and I'm going to be honest. I mean, when I see something out there that I think he should know, I'm his friend. I consider myself to be his friend. Now, this is not something that most people could understand. I get it, especially if you don't believe and you're not a Christian. It's very hard to grasp that. He's redeemed. He's a different man now. But because of that, if I see something that's really wacky out there, I will inform him. And I did. And I said, there's something going on out here where they say this and they say that you did this and whatever. And I specifically said that in the video I saw, that they said that the caliber of the bullet was not a 44. And, I talked a little bit more about it since then. Of course, there's been a lot more discussion between him and I. Whenever I go to see him, that's what he wants to talk about almost always.
Well, you told him it was the 32.
Yes. And when the police went to see him, apparently what happened was they said about this crime, and he said, but it wasn't a 44. And they thought they had tripped him up.
Tripped him up, right.
Yes. And that's what they put in the newspaper. And they thought that, but then he said, as you saw in that redaction, that I had spoken to him about that. And they actually saw my emails and they saw his emails. So they saw that, we had spoken about this and that he knew about it already. So
now, when you first told him this, what was his first reaction?
I've told him things through the years. Like there was a podcaster who started off in a good way, but then he started saying all sorts of wacky things and things that didn't make any sense. And I told him about that gentleman, and he didn't really seem to pay attention to me. And then he started getting letters from other people about that gentleman, and they were saying things like, crazy things like, if I didn't believe in Jesus, I would follow this guy. And David would send those to me, and I would say, oh my goodness, look at this. There's people out there that are crazier than anybody I know. And his reactions to things sometimes are not even, he doesn't really react that much. After a while, when he got those letters, then he started talking about that guy, and then he started to be informed. And I kept saying, look, this guy might just pop in. And even with this Wendy Savino thing, initially, he still thinks, he can't believe it. He said, I can't believe I'm being accused of this. So his initial reaction is like, what?
Yeah, that's terrible, because I think the person that actually shot her is the guy that winded up dead a few miles down the road.
I tend to lean towards that too.
That's what happened.
Just to kind of recap, just so everybody, if you're not familiar with the Wendy Savino case, April 9th, 1976, outside Nina's Italian restaurant on Boston Road in the Bronx, Wendy Savino and her husband Joe were eating dinner, and they left in separate cars. Joe left first, and then Wendy was to follow. She noticed a man, according to her, in the parking lot. Dark parking lot, that's her words. And he, according to her, he looked Italian, maybe had a tan. She noticed his blue eyes, but she also claimed to not really pay attention to him. So it's a little bit of a contradiction there. But sadly, this person did go up to her while she was in her car. She had a brand new gray Jaguar, 76 model, and she got shot 5 times. Okay. Oh, Rob. So she got shot 5 times. Okay. And sadly, she lost an eye in the process, and the other eye was filled with glass. Okay. So she was basically blinded for a time until she got well. She was in Jacobi Hospital. And there was no Son of Sam at that point. There was no 44 caliber killer. Okay. In fact, the caliber of this gun was a 32. All right. Which was not the MO of David. All right. He always used a 44. Also, this shooter basically smiled at her, leered at her, laughed at her as he was shooting her, which is something that David Berkowitz never did.
No.
Okay.
No.
Again, not his MO.
When he was arrested, he did the perp walk and he was smiling.
Yeah. That's the only time you really see him smile. Yeah. It was a nervous tick, kind of. That's why
we also have the history of where he bought the 44 caliber, because he didn't buy it here. He bought it in Texas. So
yeah. And he said he couldn't get his hands on a pistol, that he had to go down. He had a long gun that he bought legally in Brooklyn, which was recovered when he got arrested. Okay. And they found the 44 Charter Bulldog that he got in the Houston area. A friend got it for him. Okay. And he brought it back up on a road trip. Okay. And then the shootings began, and he's never been attributed to a 32. Now that's also, he worked for a company called IBI Securities.
Yeah.
And he worked nights. This happened at 11:15 at night, approximately. He worked on the west side of Manhattan in a security job. He may have even been at work. All right. Now, he can't remember, from what I understand, what you've told me.
Yeah.
He can't remember, and I think he told the police that as well, that if he was at work or not. It's 48 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
But he said he probably would have been. All right. So there's a lot here that contradicts or what the ADA calls probable cause.
Yeah.
They closed this cold case due to probable cause. David could not be charged with this because Wendy Savino survived. She's still alive. She's 87 years old. Okay. But, to close this case and attach it to the most, notorious murder case in New York City it was done too lightly. There was no investigation. A certain podcaster had brought this information to the NYPD, and in my opinion, they just ran with it and, didn't really investigate, thought they could get a slam dunk cold case here, close out a cold case, and, didn't do any investigating, took a podcaster's word for it. In fact, in that report that was written about the investigation, it said that David admitted, that this was his MO. Well, you've pointed out, Frank, to me that David did not say that. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of things in this report are not accurate, and he feels bad because what's his proof? They said what they said. It's out there. It's in the public, and the 7 or 8 people who watch that podcaster are going to think that that's actually what happened, and it's not. And there's a lot of things. First of all, David very likely, because he told me that he already applied for the apartment on Pine Avenue. Pine Street. And he said that he was probably there, but he said, how am I supposed to know where I was? Now, the other thing that's conflated in the report, it does say something to the effect of he may have slept in his car. I don't know if that was in there.
It is in there, yeah.
Right. Yeah. He said to me, no, that's not what I said. What I said was, at the Casara house, what happened was I would come home at odd hours. I would go to sleep on the second floor, and they would put their dogs outside, and their dogs would bark right under his window. And he said I couldn't sleep. Sometimes I would go and sleep at Orchard Beach. I'd just get in my car and go to sleep in the parking lot of Orchard Beach.
Wow.
And so he said that it seems like they kind of confused that. He didn't say that he was sleeping in his car for 2 weeks.
Well, there's a difference between, sleeping out on the beach one night in your car and being homeless and sleeping in your car. Right. That's two totally different things. Right. Just because he wanted to sleep outside once in a while, so what? I slept on a fire escape a few times. Yeah. All right. So, that doesn't mean anything. I'm not homeless, right? So it's
right.
That idea. See, this is how I know the investigation was BS.
Okay? Oh, they had to do it.
Because the idea of him sleeping in his car for this period of time that nobody has an answer to was made up by another podcaster, that has run with this story several times over the years. and there is absolutely no proof of it. Okay, and it's just something that was given to the cops as a, as a fact. And did they investigate it? No. Could they get the work records? Maybe. I don't know. Did anybody try? Okay. Is IDI security still around? I've looked, and I've seen some companies with that name, but I don't know if it's the same. I haven't done any digging around.
But Mike, you know me as a guy, I believe in conspiracy. I also think the student that got shot with the book in Forest Hill.
Oh, the Voskerichian shooting. Yeah.
I don't think that was him either.
Mm-mm.
To this day, I don't think that was him.
No,
I don't think a lot of those shootings were David.
He may have been there because
I think he was there, but I don't think he didn't
pull the trigger. No. We did a whole show on that back in the Son of Sam.
I thought that looked like more like a mafia hit. Somebody fucked up. They didn't want to know that they were banging these young girls, that the teachers were having sex. So, hey, let's blame the Son of Sam. That's another theory that I really believe.
Well, that kind of plays, Rob. It's perfect what you're saying, because it plays into Wendy Savino now. Okay,
exactly.
Because during the time of the Son of Sam shootings, from July of '76 to when he got apprehended in August of '77, that 2.5, that 1 year and 2 week period. Okay, basically she was in the UK, where she was from originally, hiding out. Okay, she was afraid, and rightfully so, because they used to put your address in the paper and all crazy stuff like that. She gets shot, and they're like, yeah, she lives in Pelham Manor. All right. So she was afraid that they would finish her off. Okay. Now the police had looked at this from the beginning as a possible, mob hit, a mob related thing, something back in the 70s in the Bronx. If you were Italian and something happened,
it was a mob hit.
They had to look at it that way. Okay. Joe Savino was an ex-cop. He had a private security company. All right. Like private detectives. And, he was looked at. He was also into politics, which, if you were Republican and you were Italian in the Bronx in the 70s, you knew people. Doesn't mean
in the 80s and 90s.
I'm not saying he had any involvement. I'm just saying he knew people. Okay.
But Mike, what if it was somebody he threw to jail and it's, I'm going to kill his old lady? That could be. It could be something that simple.
Well, you mentioned earlier.
In jail, I did 10 years. I'm going to kill this motherfucker.
Well, Joe Messina was found dead 2 or 3 hours after Wendy Savino, a couple hours after, about 2 blocks away. Okay. Basically fitting the description, 5'9", 160 pounds with a leather jacket. The only difference is that he had a mustache, and Wendy claimed her shooter was clean shaven. Now, dark parking lot, shot in both, one eye, glass in the other eye.
Could have missed it.
I don't know. I mean, you could have a dark room in a house and not see somebody's mustache.
Yeah.
In the right angle. Okay. Plus, you're getting shot. Are you really going to pay attention? They have done studies. I've brought this up before, that when someone points a gun at you, you look at the gun.
Yeah, you don't look at anything.
You tend not to look at the face unless it's something out of the ordinary. But and again, she started out in her interview saying that, she wasn't even really paying attention, but she knew what he looked like. So it's a little off. All right. I'm not doubting her. I think what happened to her is absolutely awful.
But Mike, you know what? Another thing we should look at?
Yeah.
Her husband ever arrest that guy? Is there any record of her husband arresting that guy?
There's so much we don't know about what the cops were investigating back then. Okay. Because in November of '76, when there were only about 2 Son of Sam related shootings, and there was no Son of Sam then, they didn't connect them yet.
Yeah.
Okay. She's in the UK and she gets subpoenaed to come back. Now, the NYPD sent a cop to the a process server, I should say, to the UK. Okay. Are they going to do that if they got nothing? Okay. She was asked to come back. She didn't come back. She didn't want to come back. Okay. Yeah. She was still afraid. Whatever, her choice. Okay. But the information of this case was actually found in the Donna Lauria file, which is the first official shooting of July of 76. And the sketch that was there and part of the police report was thrown in there because there was some, it was a random shooting a couple of months earlier. Donna Lauria was a random shooting. All right. Yeah. So the cops, different precincts were like, all right, here's some information we got about something else. Maybe you could use it. My question is, Frank, how come this was not investigated in 77 when he was arrested?
I'm going to tell you right now that I actually spoke to David Berkowitz right before our phone call, and he had no idea. I think I had emailed him and told him that I was going to do something, but he said the same thing. He goes, in 1976, why didn't they look into this? And once they connected it, why didn't they connect that to it? I mean, if it was right, if it was accurate. I mean, I don't, I mean, I think I don't believe that he did this. He actually told me he didn't do this. For what that's worth, I mean, I believe him. And regarding the mustache thing, I just want to tell you that I've had a goatee forever, and I've had people say to me one day, they'll say, "Oh, you got a goatee." I go, "Yeah, I've had it for like 2 years." People in broad daylight. I mean, it's not. I'm sorry. I think that if the one thing that's different is the mustache, the weight. David said he was 210 pounds, and that did not waver from that time.
Did he say he was that weight in 76?
Yes, he was. Yes,
we know he was that weight in 77.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. He said he was the same weight, and they said 160. I'm sorry, that's a big difference.
Some people say that that's not a lot of evidence because some people can't judge weight, but right. I think it's just another, bullet point of contradictions here. Okay, if it was the only thing, I would be like, oh well, maybe we're not sure, but there's so many other things. Right. Okay.
I hope those people judge my weight. I mean, they can.
I'd like to look 160 pounds. I'm not.
Yeah, I'd love to be. I think I was 160 pounds when I was 7 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I want to shift gears a little bit here for a second. Maria, how are you? You're very quiet for the first 20 minutes here.
Listening to you guys.
Now, you've met David a few times, right?
Yes.
What's your impression of him?
Well, when I met him, he was already, he was already in jail, and I knew his story and all that had happened through Frank. But when I met him, I just kind of met someone else, like from the church. I grew up in the church. So to me, he was like one of the elderly in my church, someone who
which church is this now, just for the viewers?
Well, it's a Christian church, but I grew up in a Pentecostal church.
I see.
But it wasn't the doctrine or anything like that led me to think that way, but more of the kind of the conversations, how, the kind of gearing all your conversations and your ideas and everything else, kind of gearing it towards Bible-based, I guess, understanding. Even when you're talking about things that are trivial, how you can gear everything that you speak about, or kind of everything you do, geared based on biblical, principles. So I think that if I had not known about his past, I would have just thought that he was just somebody who was, very voted and very knowledgeable, but not more than that, more than just the regular knowledge. Someone who kind of lives what he's, what he talks about, kind of practices, because he didn't have to perform. After a while, you kind of get the gist of the person is really performing, or it's really speaking out of, it's kind of the way he is, or it's how he guides all of his, conversation.
So your judgment basically is, Maria, that he's legitimately Christian. He's had a legitimate reform, okay, or conversion, you could say, okay. Frank, I know you believe that, okay.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, there's no doubt in your mind.
From day one, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Maria, you never was scared around him. There was nothing about him that frightened you, or even know in the background, even, or just he seems like a peaceful kind of guy, you know? Okay.
Well, it's just that, like I said, I mean, every conversation, it's someone who can, tries to kind of lift you up. It's not someone who is going to be negative, although he has a lot to be negative about. But even if you're talking about just news or anything that's going on, he always kind of twists it in a way that brings you to a biblical truth or brings you to a biblical perspective, so that you don't see things just from from the perspective, oh, look what's going on, or look at, let's say during COVID, like we talked about COVID, or if we talked about politics, he always finds a way to show you kind of biblically, and this is just a trivial conversation, how this is kind of, what is expected of the times or what is expected of people, but it kind of lives you in a way that you don't see it as a negative thing, but you kind of see it, okay, well, it is true. That's what we are, like, even when you're talking about other people, he's not looking at them in a negative way, kind of shows you the perspective that we ought to look at people, and kind of, in the same way that he was forgiven, just how we are to forgive others and kind of look at others in a positive perspective.
And I want to say one thing is, I don't know if you guys know, but you see it on TV. You see a person sitting there with a phone, and the guy's behind glass. No, so you sit in these like U-shaped tables, and the corrections officer says, "You sit here." He's going to sit. He's right across from you. I mean, he's the least intimidating person that. I mean, of all of us here, she might be the only one who's less intimidating. She's really not. He's really not. He's a really, really nice man. And I mean, has a great sense of humor. You can joke around with him. He's very nostalgic. He talks about the past a lot. Of course, that's what he knows.
That's what he remembers. Yeah.
Yes. And he's very nostalgic about New York City and, and everything that is going on. I've taken lots of pictures for him about, any place that he told me he's nostalgic about. He's just like a normal guy when you talk to him.
Also, when, like, let's say Frank brings up something about, something he heard or something he saw about the case, he rarely kind of, stays with that note about the negative or whatever. Frank usually brings him information. If he hears something or the news, what's going on, he usually kind of just twists that into a positive thing. And he say, well, it never stays like kind of feeling sorry for himself or anything like that. He usually finds a way to look at the positive, side of things, or it tries to encourage Frank and say, well, the Bible says this is what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. So he is usually someone that you may go trying to encourage, and you would be the one, encouraged by him, because he's usually very, very positive and encouraging.
He always says we have to pray for that person. We have to pray for these people, and he says that constantly. So I mean, like,
you feel he lives it. He talks it and lives it.
He absolutely does. I've received letters upon letters from David Berkowitz, and they're all loaded with Christian, just statements and Bible verses and encouraging me, and all through these 30 years. That's who he is. I've never seen anything waver on David. I've seen him personally dozens of times. I've talked to him on the phone. I've letters and emails. He is that person.
Now, the reason I wanted to kind of change gears here and get into this part of it is over the years in the community here, since I've been involved 3 years now, okay, I've noticed that a lot of people, not a lot, but a fair amount, okay, tend to not believe he is a legitimate Christian. They think he is just he's doing this to fool people, to eventually maybe get out on parole or whatever. They give a variety of reasons to deny the fact that he's an actual Christian and has reformed his life behind bars. Okay. Also, I have to mention that there is a concerted, calculating effort now by certain people in the community, especially people with other podcasts, to destroy Berkowitz as far as his Christianity, the reputation related to that. And that's just in order to push this Wendy Savino shooting and basically discredit him and make him look like a liar, okay, in the eyes of people. Now, you know, I'm not trying to gain sympathy here for David, okay? That's not what I'm doing here, okay? But I do feel that he's an easy target by people that want to make names for themselves. Okay, why not? He's a monster. Okay, he's in jail. He killed people. Okay, it's easy to attach this kind of thing onto somebody. And then the police have their agenda. They just want to close the case, put a feather in their cap, and move on. Okay, whatever. Okay, but, you know, there's a lot of agendas here. And I feel that with this case, the real person that suffers is David. Okay, and also Wendy Savino. Okay, because they're trying to give her closure here. She deserves that, but we're not sure the truth. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I've never spoken to Miss Savino. I probably won't, given my angle on it. Okay, but I just feel that it's a terrible thing what happened to her. But I feel that she's being used by other people to advance themselves in this community. Okay, and I'm going to say all I can against it for as long as I can. Okay.
Well, I can tell you, in speaking to David, one thing he always says is like, God bless Wendy Savino, that poor lady. I feel bad for her, what she's been through. She's been through so much, but he said he didn't do it. David knows that people are going to mock his Christianity. The first letter I ever received from him, I reread that. He said people are going to mock his sincerity about being a Christian. And right. Through the years, David has worked in his prison. He's worked with mental health patients with emotional disturbance. He has worked with AIDS patients. He's worked in the chapel. He's helped them to read. The people in prison are not only spiritually empty in a lot of ways, but educationally. And he's helped them in so many different ways. I mean, a guy like this, I've seen this for 30 years. That is being done exactly as you said.
Now, I got to ask you, Frank. Now, you mentioned you started off a Catholic, okay?
Yes.
And now you've become born again, okay?
Yes.
Now, is that because of David?
Well, I'll tell you, it's because of this woman. And David, yes, absolutely. Because David, when I would go to visit David, I was a Catholic. I was I'd go to church, and I go to a non-denominational church now with Maria. I was, and I've always been a believer, so that I've never wavered on that. But David did influence me through his speaking to me through hard times, especially. I was baptized when I was with Maria many years ago. And, I attribute both of them to, my walk with the Lord. I try myself. I'm certainly not as well versed as my wife or David when it comes to scriptures. I mean, I listen to it every single day. But I attribute them, and I try my best to influence other people. And maybe I do a little bit, and if I do, then that's a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems that the way to get this case pushed through, where they can really attach it to his timeline there, okay, is to discredit his Christianity.
Right.
So, I believe you when you say he's legit. I've never heard anything different. I've heard he's converted people, okay, from what I've heard. All right. Yes. Now, does that mean that doesn't mean you're a saint, okay? It doesn't take away what he did. He's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. He was just denied parole again a couple months ago. Does he have any desire to get out?
I think, I mean, honestly, I think that if given the opportunity, he wouldn't say, no, keep me here. But I think that, historically, when speaking to David, he realizes that that's a long road and there's almost no chance. And we all know, I mean, you and I know, Maria really doesn't really know that much about what happened and, what caused him to be in prison. But, we both know the notoriety of this case. And he knows that too. And even though other people have done things in the same manner and have been released, he knows that it's a long road. He goes to his parole hearings. At first, he wasn't going because he wanted to basically say, "Look, I'm guilty. Maybe it's not exactly the way the newspaper reported it, but I did things and I deserve this." But now he says he goes because he feels that the parole board would find it to be insulting if he doesn't show up. But when he goes, he said that sometimes they're extremely insulting toward him. He feels demeaned when he goes, but he endures it, and he just goes back and he receives something that says, you've been denied. Next time you can apply is in 2 years or whatever. And so I think that's his perspective. He does have somebody, at least. If he's released, he would only be released in New York. And he does have somebody who would take him in. It's like a Christian organization, and he would work with the youth. And he really wants that. I mean, when I was an assistant principal and a principal of a school, he always wanted to do things that would benefit people. He wanted to do like a card outreach in one of my work sites. He wanted to do a video. It's just, it's just really hard to get through the red tape and to get that done. And, I know the perception of who he is. But one of the things he always said, and this really impressed me, is be careful with this case. And he always said, and he told this to Maria, he said, watch Frank, don't let him get too much into this case. It's very bad. And the devil's involved. And he said that you get too deep in this case and you get just sucked into this. And he said, he always told me to be careful. I said, David, I got it. I honestly don't think I am. I mean, I see others when they're on these websites and all these Facebook pages, some of them are really, really into it. I think I may have said this already, but some guy threatened me. I mean, to beat me up. I mean, it's silly. I mean, I know this guy, I'm his friend, but I'm not as deep into this as other people are. And I do think there's a satanic element to this.
Oh, there absolutely is. Okay. There's no doubt about that. There has to be, just the way it played out. Right. This was not just a man-inspired thing.
Sorry, one of the things that when talking about that, one of the things that he wants to warn Frank and others is that they get into this case and then they start learning about the what do you call it? The cult and what they were doing, and kind of takes away from the message. The message that he wants people to know is that this is who David was. He made mistakes. He's paying for them, but he was redeemed. He was saved, and he wants people to know that the story of who saved him and the new person that he is. Because if most people would get involved into the darkness that happened, then it defeats the purpose. He doesn't want that. Like, if he ever has an opportunity to talk about, the case, he doesn't want to talk about the darkness and the cult and the what they used to do. He wants to talk about what God did through him, how God saved him, and how a person who had the life he had and the darkness that he lived, how that person came into the light and who brought him to the light.
Right. So, well, forgiveness is something that's a basis of Christianity. It's a backbone of Christianity. anyone that calls themselves a Christian, whether it's Catholic or Pentecostal or born again, whatever, forgiving people is a backbone of that. That's what Christ taught. Okay. The problem is we live in a world today that is not so Christ-centered. Okay. Even in small ways, it's in very little ways. Okay. And, people find it much easier to just dismiss people and cancel them. Okay. Than it is to actually say, hey, well, there's another side to this. Okay. And, my thing is who are we as just human beings to judge another person's Christianity? Who are we?
I agree 100%.
I think that's like a disgusting thing to be doing. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's horrible because you're putting yourself as judge, jury, and executioner.
Right.
Okay. And David is paying for his crimes. He's in jail. He's a model prisoner. He's helped people. He's changed his life in jail. There's things that have gone on. Okay, even since I've been involved with the case, in particular with DeGennaro, where he got different stories from David and contradictions from David. This is the reason why we're not going to solve this case. Okay, because there's been so many contradictions, even from David. Does that mean that he's not a Christian? I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to judge that. That's not what we're here to do. Okay. But the people that research this case or pretend to research the case seem to think that they can judge. Okay. And they can't. They don't have that right. Okay.
They have no idea. I mean, I know him and I've seen him and I've spoken to him. So has Maria. My father has spoken. My father, who is real old school, and my father saw an 8-part video, 8 or 9 parts with David. Right. And he saw that. He knew that I was friends with him. And he said to me, he goes, I'd like to meet him. Shockingly. Wow. I took him to see David Berkowitz, and my father's an ex-police officer in the 4-5. So he went there and David Berkowitz, David emails me after. He says, what a great father. He goes, man, I would love to go out and hang out with him and go to a ball game, eat hot dogs. I mean, it was, and then I took my brother's also ex-NYPD, and they believe him. And they're Catholics, my brother and my father, and I don't have anything against any religion, and I'm not, just because I'm a Christian and I don't profess to be a Catholic anymore. Of course, I have nothing but respect for anybody who believes in God, and I think that's missing in America today. So I think more of that. It doesn't matter what denomination, I mean, I don't understand how anybody can say that about David. They never spoke to him. They want to. They'd like to, some of them.
They'd like to, sure.
Right. And that might be burning them up inside. And I guess it bothers some people that they're not close enough to it, and they may think that they're doing valid research. And I don't agree with that, but they have their followers, that a few people listen to them.
That's fine. Whatever. But the judging and doesn't bring anything to the case.
It's in the Bible not to do that. I mean, my goodness. I mean, that's, but not, you and me and Maria know that. And but Rob, also, some people don't know that, and they
But also the one of the principles of the Bible is that we will be known by our fruit. So we know that whatever he did in the past, he took responsibility for it. He's paying the price for that, and he will pay that for probably for the rest of his life. But after, if we see the change in his life prior, even when he was in jail in the beginning, when he had not repented, he was a different David. I mean, there was, the behavior was totally different, even the first few years before his conversion. But there was a drastic change after his conversion, and he has remained the same person with the same convictions,
It's been
the
35
same,
years or so,
yeah,
right?
for all that, with nothing else to gain. But I mean, it's very difficult to maintain that. You can, unless you're genuine, it's very difficult to maintain something where everyone can speak about your fruit. This is not people in church. These are people in prison. So the people who he's surrounded by are people who are going to challenge him in many ways. He's in the loop, and everybody else can just be very judgmental because they know who he is and they know that. Yet we don't hear that. We don't hear negative, things, whether it's in jail or they actually have used him a lot to serve other people, to help other people throughout the different times and places that he has been in prison. So his fruits are not the ones that are speaking for him. We have examples in the Bible, Paul, who was also
Right.
a murderer and then repented. So when his people did the same thing, they judged him afterwards, but the fruits spoke for him. And in the same case, we don't have anything to say after the case. Whatever happened is part of the old David.
Right. Okay. Well, Frank and Maria DeGennaro, thank you for coming on the show. And you shed some light on everything here. And you were front and center with this Wendy Savino case, giving that information to David.
And people, I've seen it said that I somehow knew the police were coming.
Oh, right.
I don't know how that could possibly happen. I mean, how was I able to do that?
How would you know when the police were going to come? Yeah,
I don't know, but I've heard that, and I said, you have to be kidding. And I've been called all sorts of names. I've been called names because of my friends. I mean, like, why? What's wrong with people where they feel they have to do something like that? I mean, like,
the community is entirely toxic now. That's the problem.
It's
we know why that is.
yes, we do.
Okay, so thanks for coming on. And,
thank you.
I'm sure we'll have our usual chats about what's going on in the world.
Sure.
Okay. And Rob, what do we say at the end of every episode?
We don't get drunk.
We get lumped up.
We don't get drunk much anymore.
I worked a 10-hour shift today, so I'm like, wow.
Yes. I heard. That's why we're doing it at 9:30. It's cool. Thank you, though.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for letting us say what we said.
Yeah.
No, but thank you, Frank and Maria, for all the great information, all the research you guys did, and thank you for talking to David and giving some information because that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're friends of his, so
yeah,
and I'm fine with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Take care, folks.
All right. Bye.
From previous shootings and subsequent shootings, because
There's a walkway right here to my left.